Where are you calling from?
From Georgia.
From Georgia, not Georgia in United States. The
Original Georgia.
Yes, that one.
Good.
Albert Watson is a Scottish fashion celebrity and art photographer. Watson is a true master of photography. His work blends the expressive strengths of visual art and the glamour of fashion into unforgettable images that have shaped the contemporary world. As one of the most influential photographers whose success comes from a lifelong commitment to the pursuit of creativity, Albert Watson's photographs present the world within a distinctive, remarkable vision. Albert Watson has photographed our time's most influential people, but it's not only reason why photography is iconic, it's his unique vision which blends art and photography together. Albert Watson has been photographing more than half century. He has shot over 100 covers of Vogue and 40 covers of Rolling Stone magazine, and has created major advertising campaigns for clients such as Prada, Chanel, and Levi's. Photo District News named Albert one of 20 most influential photographers of all time, along with Irving Penn and Richard Avedon. While talking to me, photographer remembers the first celebrity shoot he had. It was the iconic director Alfred Hitchcock for Harper's Bazaar.
Like everybody, I knew who Alfred Hitchcock was. And it was for the Harper's Bazaar magazine, and it was for their Christmas issue, for the Christmas issue. And not a lot of people knew that Alfred Hitchcock was a gourmet cook. It was his main hobby. He loved cooking. And he had offered to give the magazine a recipe on how to cook a goose. And so my photograph was to illustrate his recipe. In other words, on one page is the recipe and the other page is Alfred Hitchcock. So initially they wanted me to do it with Alfred Hitchcock holding a cooked goose on a plate. But I called them back and said I thought that it was better if they do the goose before the cooking. And if you look closely, you'll see that I even put some Christmas decorations around the goose's neck, because the original shot, I did it in color and black and white, but the original shot was in color. And but the shot that became well known was black and white. And basically, I was very nervous, but of course, he was fabulous. He made it very interesting for me. He made it, he was very cooperative, and he was like photographing a very good cooperative actor. So he really was acting lots of funny things with the goose. And so therefore he made the shooting very easy for me. So I was very lucky that he was the first celebrity.
It is very interesting, so that Steve Jobs did not like to take photos and hated photographers, but the photo you took, he likes the most.
Well, just before I photographed him, 5 minutes before he arrived, the PR people told me and said, Steve doesn't like to be photographed, he hates photography. But in the small amount of time between speaking to the PR and Steve Jobs arriving, I thought on just a small something that might make the shooting go better. And he was supposed to be with me for 1 hour. And I told him, I said, I think I can do the shooting in half an hour. And he was so happy that it was not going to be 1 hour, but it was going to be half an hour, that he was totally happy about that. And When he arrived, he looked at everything that I had set up in a big room. And I think he was, of course, a very smart guy, super smart. And I think he saw that we were very well organized. And he was very interested that I was still shooting film at that time, not digital. And he said to me, he agreed that film at that point was better than digital at that time. But he said, in the near future, he said, film will become almost obsolete. And he was, I don't think he was 100% right, but he was pretty correct. And so I was very organized with him. I knew what I wanted to say to him. And I wanted the portrait to be very simple. I knew he would appreciate that. Nothing too fake, nothing too done, but really a very strong, iconic picture of him. Super simple, but to concentrate with him and his look. In other words, how is he looking at the camera? How is he working the camera? And I just worked with him like that. And in about 20 minutes, I did about 4 situations in 20 minutes. And he looked at the Polaroid. He loved the Polaroid. He asked if he could have the Polaroid. And then he said, I think it's one of the best pictures taken of me. Can I have the Polaroid? I said, sure. And I thought he was being nice. But then, of course, a few years later, when he died, he made it clear that that was the shot that he wanted to use, like you would say in English, an obituary, you know. So they used that shot to announce that he had died. So, of course, it was very sad. But it was, of course, it was nice for me that he liked the shot, you know.
One of the photos which I like the most is the photo of Jack Nicholson in the mirror. So how did you took it?
It was very difficult to do because, you know, each mirror had to be supported by a box behind. And to get the angle, you always have to remember that the mirrors, when you put them all together, are about 3.5, 4 meters wide.
You have many interesting photos, and also one that I want to ask about is Andy Warhol's portrait. It's a very interesting photo with glasses. Can you tell us the story behind it?
Very few people know that Andy Warhol was with a modeling agency. You could rent Andy Warhol for a job. And that shooting, the shot of him with the glasses, was for German men's Vogue, Men Vogue. And they asked me to photograph 6 pairs of glasses on him. When he arrived, he had in his pocket a picture, and there was a movie poster of Arnold Schwarzenegger with the glasses on, you know, looking up. And Andy Warhol brought me that photograph and said, can you make me look like this? So it was actually Andy Warhol's idea. He wanted to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, kind of. And I said, sure, we can try it. And that's where the shot came from. And Andy, I knew Andy well because I worked for him for years and years in the 70s for Interview magazine, when it was Andy Warhol's Interview.
First thing, when you Google Albert Watson, it shows the link where it is written, how to photograph like legendary Albert Watson. So what do you tell us?
Well, I was very lucky. I was at university for a long time. I did 4 years of art training, including mainly graphic design. So that was the first thing. So if you look at all the pictures, including the concept of Alfred Hitchcock holding a goose, but by the neck, that's concept thinking. You know, that's because you think, you prepare, you think. Not just now, a lot of times photographers, they think about maybe the background, the foreground, the lighting, and sometimes they're not thinking enough about concept, you know? So I was lucky that I had art training, graphic design training, and then I went to film school for 3 years to be a director. So I actually had a very good combination of training: art, graphic design, and film directing. So therefore, with film directing, you're working with people, telling them how to work, how to do things, what is their attitude, and how do they work together, you know? Most of the time, people studying photography, a lot of time they just study photographs, which is not a bad thing at all, is a good thing. But sometimes you have to expand it. You have to be thinking about going to the opera. You have to think about going to art movies, good movies, powerful movies, old American movies, Italian verite cinema. So you think about that. But then you also think about painters, great painters.
It will be so interesting if you could come to Georgia and photograph our country. And
of course, I know that Georgia is beautiful. I don't know if you know this, but there is a series of villages in Georgia in the south where all of the people live to be 90, 95, 100, 102 years old. And the National Geographic magazine did a story on the villages years ago, and they found out that they tested everything: the water, the food, the people. But the one thing they found out about the people was they never stopped working. Even they just did different work. So therefore, a man who was in his 30s could lift any heavy weight and sacks. But then the work, as they got older and the person was less strong, they gave them smaller things to do. But even when they got to 60, 70, 80, 90 years old and 100, people were still doing some work, sometimes small, sometimes 3 hours a day, 4 hours, but they never stopped working. And they came to the conclusion that this was the reason that all of these people in southern Georgia lived longer, was because they were always active, working. They didn't stop. In the West, a lot of people stop working 65, and unless you're careful, it can be very dangerous because the body begins to shut down because you retire and you sit around your house all day, you know, and retire. Whereas these people in southern Georgia lived long because they were always working.
Thank you, Albert, for the interview. It was really amazing to talk to you and to know your stories behind the photographs from you.
It was a pleasure. Look after yourself. Bye.